Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere hot, really hot. Imagine yourself standing in the middle of the Persian plateau, somewhere around the 5th century BCE. The sun is an oppressive white eye in the sky, and the ground under your sandals is practically frying your toes. The air smells like dust, sun-baked clay, and faint rosewater wafting from a merchant's cart. You're wearing layers of linen because, ironically, that's how they deal with the heat, layers. You've been trudging through this ancient city for hours. Your skin feels sticky, your tongue is dry, and your only thoughts are cold water, shade, and maybe never walking again. And then, like a mirage, you're handed a small clay bowl of chilled pomegranate seeds. Yes, chilled. You blink, wondering if this is some sort of oasis fever dream. You probably won't survive this heat for a week, let alone an entire summer. But somehow, the locals not only endure it, they chill their snacks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing our sleepy little community around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The city around you hums with quiet activity. Terraced homes stretch along narrow alleys. Vendors mumble greetings from behind carts loaded with dates, nuts, and spices. You pass a man carefully sweeping dust from his doorstep with a broom made of palm fronds. Somewhere nearby, a pot of lentils simmers over a smoky clay hearth. And as the evening call to prayer echoes in the distance, you begin to notice something odd. Some homes, especially those of the elite, have small domed towers rising beside them. Pale, egg-shaped structures built from mud brick. You point at one. The local child tugging at your robe nods and says a single word, yakhchāl. Ice pit. It's not a metaphor. It's not a nickname. It's quite literally a giant desert refrigerator. You wake early the next day, stretched out on a woven mat beneath a reed ceiling, only to discover it's already sweltering. There's no such thing as cool mornings here. The air is thick and motionless, the sort of heat that settles on your skin like a heavy blanket, even before breakfast. You shuffle outside and join the morning tide of people moving through the dusty streets, seeking shade like sun-drunk lizards. Life here means adapting to the desert's harsh rhythm. You drink water stored in clay jars, cooler than you expected, even without ice. You watch women balance them on their heads, gliding effortlessly down alleys. You pass a bearded man in long robes tending goats, their bleats echoing off the mud brick walls. Everyone seems used to it. No one complains. They just move slower, talk softer, and nap often. The buildings help. They're thick-walled, built from sun-dried bricks that trap the night's chill and fend off midday heat. Courtyards open to the sky let the breeze, if it ever shows up, filter through homes. But even with all this architecture designed to outsmart the climate, you're still confused. How do these people keep anything cold? You pass a shaded stall selling jars of pickled lemons and chilled rose syrup. Chilled. Again. You lift a jar to your cheek and flinch from the sudden coolness. How? It's 104 degrees, and you haven't seen a single cube of ice, much less a freezer. Historians still argue whether the average Persian household could access real ice or whether it was reserved for the elite. What's clear is that somebody, somewhere, had cracked the code. The yakhchāl wasn't just storage, it was survival. A kind of quiet, sandy miracle rising from the scorched earth. And you're about to see exactly how that miracle works. You're escorted through a gate by a wiry old man with sun-leathered skin and a grin that says he knows something you don't. He waves you along a narrow path until it opens into a courtyard dominated by one strange feature, a massive, beehive-shaped structure, pale and silent. It looks like a spaceship made from mud. You squint up at it, at least 60 feet high, and realize you've finally met your first real yakhchāl. This isn't just a pile of bricks. It's an ancient feat of engineering. Inside that dome, the Persians somehow managed to store snow and ice all year round. In the middle of the desert. With no metal pipes, no copper coils, no electricity. Just sun, sweat, and a shocking amount of cleverness. The man gestures toward a small arched entrance, and you duck inside. The air changes instantly. It's cool. Not just less hot. Genuinely, skin-pricklingly cool. You can feel your scalp relax. The walls curve inward, drawing your eyes toward the apex of the dome high above. Your breath fogs slightly in the shade. A small canal runs along the floor, and you hear the faint trickle of water, melted ice, or maybe just condensation. Clay pots line the walls, sealed tight, whispering secrets of stored dates, milk, and syrup. You ask the old man, half joking, "How is this possible?" He shrugs, as if the miracle's so old it's boring now. Historians still debate whether these yakhchāls were mainly for storing food, preserving medicine, or just keeping the royal water supply icy fresh. What's agreed on is that these domes did more than refrigerate. They represented power, wealth, and stunning environmental adaptation. And out here, where the wind can strip your lips and the sun can boil your brain, coldness isn't just comfort. It's status. You crouch beside the inner wall, tracing your fingers along the surface. It's smooth but not uniform, pressed mud mixed with ash, lime, and something gritty, probably camel hair or straw. The old man taps it with a knuckle. Solid. He says one word, saruj. This ancient waterproof plaster is the real unsung hero here. Forget marble or gold leaf. Saruj is a mix of humble ingredients that, once set, resists water like a desert version of Tupperware. It lines the entire interior of the yakhchāl, sealing in the chill and sealing out the heat. The structure's shape isn't random either. That dome you saw? It's more than pretty. It creates a convection current inside. Warm air rises, cold air sinks, and the curve of the dome helps this cycle move gently without fans or fuss. Think of it like nature's own lazy air conditioner. And it gets better. You step outside again and follow a narrow trench carved into the ground. It leads to a small square opening near the base of the yakhchāl. That's the ice pit. During winter, they'd pour shallow pools of water into shaded troughs overnight. Desert nights get brutally cold, cold enough to freeze a finger off, let alone water. In the morning, the ice is gathered and dumped into the pit, where it stays for months. Historians still argue whether Persian engineers knew the full physics behind what they were doing, or if it was all just centuries of trial and error. Either way, they nailed it. You sit beside the dome's shadow, sipping a clay cup of cold rosewater, and think, somewhere between mud and mathematics, these folks built a fridge with no moving parts, and it's still standing. Later that evening, you find yourself perched on a flat rooftop, enjoying a slight breeze and watching shadows stretch across the sand. Below, the yakhchāl glows faintly in the moonlight, elegant, silent, and surprisingly beautiful. As you sip from another cup of chilled something, you've stopped asking, you overhear a story from a group of women weaving by lamplight. One tells of her grandmother who used to sneak snow from the yakhchāl to chill saffron syrup for her children during Nowruz, the Persian New Year. Not out of necessity, but just to see their eyes widen. Coldness as delight. Yakhchāls weren't just machines, they were part of family life, woven into memory and ritual. Weddings featured chilled melon. Death rituals called for iced water. Even poetry nodded to cool lips and ice-kissed dates. You begin to see it, the yakhchāl wasn't simply practical. It was poetic. A symbol of mastery over nature, over scarcity. And socially, they mattered. Elite households often had their own private yakhchāls, while communities shared larger ones, early examples of municipal infrastructure. Want to impress someone? Hand them chilled pomegranate juice in July. That's how you flex in ancient Persia. Historians still puzzle over how much ice each yakhchāl could hold. Estimates range from a few tons to entire camel caravans worth. What's more fascinating is how they kept it all frozen despite the blazing sun. You wonder, how much of that was science, and how much was sheer stubborn desert wisdom? As stars bloom overhead and laughter echoes from neighboring rooftops, you start to appreciate how cooling things down, literally, wasn't just about comfort. It was about control. About turning the desert into something livable, even luxurious. And the real magic. No electricity. Just mud, wind, and time. The next morning, you're up before the sun, trailing a group of laborers heading toward a dry riverbed. One of them carries a curved shovel slung over his shoulder. Another hums a low tune. You're here to learn about the secret partner in the yakhchāl's brilliance, the ancient underground water system called the kanat. At first glance, it's hard to see anything, just a long line of small mounds dotting the landscape like molehills. But each one marks a vertical shaft leading to a tunnel deep underground. The kanat isn't flashy, but it's genius, a gently sloped tunnel carved into the earth, channeling fresh water from distant mountain aquifers all the way to the desert plains, without pumps, motors, or spells. You climb down into one of the shafts, the temperature dropping with every rung. The air grows damp and deliciously cool. At the bottom, a stream gurgles softly in the darkness. The walls are carved smooth, the floor gently sloped. And here's the twist, this kanat passes right beneath the yakhchāl. That's no accident. The cold groundwater absorbs some of the structure's heat, and in return, the moving air helps keep the dome's base cool and dry. Together, they form a passive refrigeration system that would make any modern engineer weep with admiration, and probably frustration. Historians still debate who invented the first kanats. Some credit the Persians. Others point to older examples in Mesopotamia or even Afghanistan. But no one disputes that Persia perfected them, especially when paired with the mighty yakhchāl. You emerge from the shaft squinting against the sun, dust clinging to your clothes. And yet, you feel oddly refreshed. You've just walked inside a 2,500-year-old air conditioner. And the best part? It's powered by gravity and patience. Later, you rest in the shade of a tamarisk tree while a younger boy, probably no older than 14, explains how his father layers straw and blankets over the ice pit. You think he's joking. Blankets? In a desert? But no, these aren't for warmth, they're insulation. Woven from reeds, goat hair, and time-tested stubbornness. The key, he tells you, is to trap the cold in and the heat out. So they use thick mats, layers of ash and sand, even sawdust if it's around. This boy rattles it off like he's explaining how to tie his shoes. Because here, this knowledge isn't exotic. It's just Tuesday. You peek under one of the layers, half expecting to see slush. Instead, crystal clear ice glints in the dark pit like treasure. Some slabs are wrapped in cloth, others left bare. All of it looks ready to cool a feast or a fevered child. And here's something that sticks with you. This preservation technique wasn't just used for ice. Dates, pickled lemons, medicinal herbs, even delicate rose petals were packed in beside the frost. They believed the cold purified, calmed, even healed. You wonder if they were wrong. Historians still argue over how much food was stored versus how much was ceremonial or symbolic. But the presence of storage jars, wrapped tightly and labeled with soot ink, suggests this wasn't just luxury. It was smart survival. You sip something cold, again, and it hits you. This isn't some freak trick of nature. It's the result of generations watching the stars, mapping the winds, and learning when the desert decides to freeze. And you start to get it. The yakhchāl isn't just about ice. It's about controlling the uncontrollable. About wrapping your arms around the wild. You're walking now through a small market square, the air thick with spice and the slow shuffle of sandaled feet. The sun's rising higher, but the stalls stay shaded by wide linen awnings. One vendor waves you over and slices open a cold fig. Wait, cold. It's been stored in a clay pot lined with ice chips from the yakhchāl. And not just any pot, a glazed, double-walled jar designed to keep coolness in like a secret. You bite into the fig, and it's like tasting February in the middle of June. Food preservation was an art here. Beyond figs, they cooled honey-sweetened melon slices, thick yogurt, rosewater drinks, and even fish, hauled up from distant rivers and rushed across dunes on camelback just to make it into these ice-lined jars. One older merchant explains with a chuckle that serving cold melon to guests was a subtle power move. If your melon's cold, he says, you've either got money, brains, or a cousin who guards the yakhchāl. Historians still argue about the social significance of chilled dishes. Was it purely culinary? Or was there a deeper symbolism in serving something so rare, So fleeting? A kind of seasonal defiance in the face of drought and heat? You watch a little girl carry a bowl of iced sour cherry syrup to her grandfather, who nods approvingly, then drizzles it over a loaf of bread. No fanfare. Just a routine miracle. And it hits you again. These weren't people eking out a survival in the desert. They were mastering it. Flipping the narrative. Turning a hostile climate into an elegant game of precision, ritual, and shared delight. And somewhere in that bowl of syrup, in the perfect stillness of cold, is a reminder. Ingenuity thrives where the stakes are high, and the sun is higher. Later that day, you find yourself seated cross-legged beside an elderly man weaving a basket in the shade of the yakhchāl's curved base. His fingers move automatically, rhythmically, but his mind is elsewhere. He's telling stories. One tale stands out. He recalls a time when a rival village tried to sabotage their yakhchāl by pouring warm water into the ice pit at night. Didn't work, he grins. Ours was built better. And we had smarter camels. You're not sure how much of that is true, but it doesn't really matter. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're preservation. Oral history passed down with the same care as the ice itself. You learn that yakhchāls were sometimes guarded, protected by specific families or guilds. The knowledge of their construction, how to orient them, how to maintain the dome's shape, how to read the wind, was often kept within lineages, like a family recipe for cold. And here's the twist. Some communities even assigned a yakhchāl keeper, a kind of desert custodian responsible for regulating usage, guarding supplies, and enforcing seasonal quotas. Because ice was valuable. It needed order. Historians still argue whether these roles were formal or informal, sacred or simply practical. But many texts describe ceremonies at the opening of the ice season, chants, lamps, and garlands of basil tossed into the pit for luck. Ice, it seems, could be holy. You watch the old man twist another strip of reed into place, his story tapering off like smoke. Around you, the air buzzes faintly, warm and dry. But under your feet, inside that dome, cold lies in wait. And you realize this place wasn't just a marvel of engineering, it was a social institution. A hub of memory, of folklore, of whispered jokes and inherited secrets. A village freezer, and a village elder. That night, the stars reappear like spilled salt across a navy sky, and you lie awake on a rooftop, belly full of saffron rice and chilled pomegranate juice. Somewhere nearby, someone's playing a ney flute, soft, mournful, almost like the desert itself is sighing. You start thinking about the bigger picture. This ice, this whole system of cooling, wasn't just some quaint village trick. It was a network. In major Persian cities like Yazd and Kashan, yakhchāls were built near caravanserais and trade roads, positioned strategically for both access and prestige. Travelers could purchase chipped ice for a price, or trade goods for chilled rosewater. Merchants timed their routes around ice availability. A good yakhchāl could turn a town into a desert pit stop with 5-star refreshments and camel parking. You learn that some larger domes had rudimentary ice banks, a literal supply system where ice was deposited, tracked, and withdrawn like a frosty currency. Scarce in the hot season, but priceless when a wedding, birth, or royal guest rolled into town. And here's something that tickles your modern brain. Some scholars argue that the yakhchāl system was an early example of civic refrigeration infrastructure, akin to waterworks or grain silos. Ice wasn't hoarded. It was managed. Historians still debate the extent of bureaucratic control over these domes. Were they municipal projects? Privately owned? Some blend of both? Inscriptions inside certain domes hint at public benefactors, wealthy patrons who footed the bill in exchange for eternal gratitude and occasional chilled melon. Above you, a breeze stirs the air. The flute fades. And it clicks. Ice wasn't the end goal. It was a means to community, celebration, survival. And this ancient logistics system, cobbled together from mud, wind, and dreams of winter, turned the impossible into the everyday. You rise early the next morning to watch repairs being done on the outer dome. The workers scale it barefoot, roped together like climbers, their shadows long and warped on the curved surface. Their tools are simple, wooden scrapers, smooth stones, and buckets of something that looks like wet bread dough. It's sarouj, one tells you, An ancient waterproofing plaster. A blend of clay, lime, ash, sand, goat hair, and sometimes even egg whites. It dries like cement but breathes like skin. These domes have stood for centuries because of saruj. You run your fingers along a finished patch. It feels cool, faintly textured, like the inside of a seashell. These people don't just build for function, they build for forever. One mason shares a local superstition that if you whisper a wish while applying the last layer of saruj, the dome will protect your family from illness. He shrugs as he says it, but he whispers anyway. You do too. Why not? And here's the detail that sticks. Saruj isn't just for insulation. It also deters termites, resists erosion from salt winds, and gives the dome a smooth, reflective surface that throws sunlight back into the sky like a mirror. That's desert tech. Passive climate control. Historians still debate whether the formula was standardized or varied from town to town. Some records mention adding cactus sap, others crushed oyster shells. Like sourdough starter, it evolved with each builder's hand. You sit in the shade again, sipping a cold barley drink, and realize something obvious and beautiful. This isn't a lost technology. It's a slow one. A patient one. One that doesn't shout but endures. The desert tries to erase things. But somehow, this mud, ash, and wishful thinking has outlasted empires. As the sun arcs overhead, you duck into a quieter corner of the village, a modest archive tucked behind a mosque, where dust motes hang like lazy fireflies. Inside, a bearded man in a green robe unfurls parchment after parchment, each one inked with diagrams of domes, air shafts, and sloping canals. You're staring at ancient architectural blueprints. Floor plans for cold. One of the scrolls shows a cross-section of a yakhchāl with measurements, orientation angles, and something called a kanat, a gently sloping underground water channel that connects the yakhchāl to a remote water source, sometimes miles away. That's how they got water into the dome in the first place, by letting it flow uphill, sort of. Well, downhill from a mountain spring, but underground, shielded from evaporation, guided by pure geometry and gravity. You raise your eyebrows, and the man nods. We built rivers underground, he says. Invisible ones. Historians still argue how widespread this kanat-yakhchāl combination was. Some say it was standard practice in larger cities. Others believe it was a rare luxury. But the integration of waterworks and ice domes shows something bigger. This wasn't just architecture. It was systems thinking. A civilization engineering its climate one trench at a time. And here's a tiny gem. Some yakhchāls had ice windows, thin vertical slots that let cool air drift in without sunlight touching the storage chamber. Like ancient HVAC vents, tuned for survival. You lean over a scroll and see a child's drawing scribbled in the margins, a stick figure with a cone-shaped dome and what might be a goat. Maybe the architect's kid. Maybe the earliest doodle of passive cooling ever made. And in that quiet little room, lined with paper and possibility, you start to feel something rare in history. Awe without urgency. Nothing is burning. Nothing is crashing. Just a people, solving summer. By twilight, you're back near the yakhchāl, and something new catches your eye. A low stone bench beside the dome, carved with strange spirals and flower patterns. A local woman tells you this is the cool seat, a place to rest after hauling ice or just to enjoy the draft sneaking out from beneath the dome. She offers you a fig and explains how ice was rationed out during the hottest weeks. Families would send a child, basket in hand, to collect their portion. If the child was polite, the keeper might slip in an extra sliver. Manners mattered, she says, especially with ice. You laugh, imagining frosty diplomacy between toddlers. Then she mentions the ice days, celebratory days when enough ice remained by midsummer that the village would host a tiny feast. Sherbet with crushed mint. Cold yogurt soup. Mulberries chilled to the point of snapping between your teeth. Historians still argue whether these ice days were officially sanctioned or more spontaneous village happenings. But travelers from the 10th and 11th centuries describe them with fondness. Small bursts of joy baked right into the calendar, like the solstice or the first pomegranate bloom. You begin to realize, these domes weren't just about staying cool. They were about hope. About holding on to a piece of winter when the world was all sun and sweat. Even now, you feel the breeze curling out from the vents near the base. It's not dramatic. Just a breath. But it carries something strange and lovely, a mix of damp earth, lime plaster, and the faintest scent of fennel seeds stored nearby. You sit on the cool seat a while longer, letting the silence drape over your shoulders like a damp cotton sheet. The desert may rule this place. But inside the dome? Winter whispers back. Night returns, slow and golden, and you find yourself wandering the alleys again. Lamps flicker behind latticework windows, casting honeycomb shadows on the walls. Somewhere, someone is roasting chickpeas. A cat watches you like it owns the block, which, let's be honest, it probably does. You drift past a pair of elderly men playing backgammon, their board balanced on an upturned crate. One of them waves you over, and as you sit, he gestures toward the massive dome behind you. Used to be 3 of them, he says. 1 for the nobles, 1 for the commoners, 1 for weddings. You raise an eyebrow, and he shrugs. The wedding dome always had the best ice. He's only half joking. Turns out, yakhchāls weren't always communal. Some were commissioned privately, for wealthy households or palatial compounds. Persian nobles in the Sasanian and later Safavid eras would flaunt their chilled treats the way some folks flash designer watches today. A cool grape in July, the man says, meant you were rich enough to bend time. There's a surviving rumor, historians still argue whether it's true, that one ruler had his servants pack ice into silver molds shaped like birds, just to watch them melt slowly during court poetry readings. Ice birds. Melted metaphors. You can practically hear the odes. And in the fanciest homes, ice wasn't stored underground, it was served on marble trays, over velvet, beside sherbet infused with rose petals and violet syrup. But even in these opulent settings, the dome was sacred. No one touched the ice chamber without a blessing. Some records even mention charms buried in the walls, small stones etched with prayers to keep the frost from turning sour. You glance back toward the dome. Even in its silence, it commands reverence. Not for its luxury, but for its balance, a monument to how human beings learned to live gently with a brutal climate. Later, as stars scatter themselves generously across the velvet sky, you return one last time to the dome. Everything is still now. No workers, no storytellers, no cats claiming territory. Just the quiet curve of ancient mud, glowing faintly in the moonlight. You press your palm against the wall. It's cool again. Always cool. The same temperature it has been for centuries. Somehow, it still holds the night. Inside, the ice is gone, used, rationed, celebrated, and now melted into memory. But the architecture remains. The shell. The secret. The answer to a question humans have asked since we first stepped into the sun. How do we keep something precious from vanishing? You think back to all the things you've learned, about air tunnels and egg whites, spiraled domes and icebergs, sleepy drafts and superstitions. About how a society without electricity, without plastic or steel, made cold from the dirt beneath their feet. Historians still debate what finally replaced the yakhchāls. Modern refrigeration? Colonial influence? Shifting cities? But the dome itself outlasted all that, its cooling grace now studied by architects, sustainability experts, and desert dwellers around the globe. And here's one final detail to rest on. In some places, the old yakhchāls have been reactivated. Not just preserved. Used. Locals are gathering snow again. Young engineers are sketching new air tunnels. Villagers are celebrating ice days once more, just as their ancestors did. You close your eyes. The breeze stirs gently through the sand. The dome behind you hums its long, silent song. You don't need more history tonight. Just this. Just a whisper of cold in the warmest place on earth. And now, we slow things even more. Take a long, deep breath, one that fills your chest, then your belly. Let it go like the warm wind gliding across the desert stones. You've wandered through ancient alleyways, rested beneath a dome older than some languages, and learned how people once sculpted winter from sand. There's something oddly comforting about that, isn't there? That human beings, regardless of the century, will always find clever, beautiful ways to meet their needs. And sometimes, they'll even leave behind a quiet gift for the rest of us to marvel at. So as you settle deeper into your pillow, maybe pull the blanket a little higher. Let yourself imagine the curve of a yakhchāl above you. A dome that doesn't rush, doesn't blink, just keeps cool, patient vigil. Maybe you hear the soft crunch of sand beneath sandals, the faint whistle of air through a canet, the scent of clay, still holding the chill. You are safe. You are still. There is nothing you need to remember. Nothing you need to do. If your thoughts drift like desert smoke, let them. You've already made the journey. This is the resting place. And should your mind wander back to egg white mortar, fig sherbet, or ice shaped like birds, well, that's just the dome whispering to you. Sleep well, traveler. May your dreams be cool.